Congratulations. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for a great event, and I'm very honored to be here today. And what I've decided to do for this afternoon session is talk about networking, because today you've gained a lot of theory and a lot of great practical advice also. But what I wanted to drill down is into networking, because I feel that that's one of the most vital bridges towards building a successful startup, a successful business, or even expanding your career. So what we'll do is that just as the slide starts to come up, there we go. Right, okay. Do we have the clicker? Thank you so much. All right. Here we go. Okay, we'll kick it off now. Thank you. Right. Okay, so this afternoon session is titled Activate Your Global Islamic Network. And I hope to provide you some insights and tips into how to do so. But before I do so, I'll just do a bit of a quick introduction to myself. I was born at an Indonesian village called Padang Panjang at West Sumatra in 1976, which means I'm about 40 years old right now. But when I was a child, I moved over to Sydney in Australia. That's where I was completely educated in Australia. Went to university at the University of Technology, Sydney, studied communications. And then thereafter, got a scholarship from the Indonesian government as well as the Australian government to study back at the University of Indonesia. Then I returned back to Australia to complete my master's degree in international relations there at the Faculty of Economics. And then I got my first job ever in financial services at a company called American Express, where I worked for about 5 years until they transferred me over to Singapore. And I worked at Singapore for about 4 or 5 years also, still for American, for 4 or 5 years. And that's when I migrated from American Express to the advertising and marketing agency side. And I worked for a company called Ogilvy and Mather, and under the WPP group, which included Wunderman, Young & Rubicam, etc. And I was there to help companies such as American Express, Citibank, as well as Samsung, what else is there, LG, Microsoft, and all of these big companies launch their products and services around the world. And from Singapore, I migrated over to Hong Kong to continue doing so, where I lived for about a year. And from Hong Kong, with the same company, I ended up moving over to London, so where I've spent most of the past decade just living and working in London. And then thereafter, I moved over to San Francisco, where I became a global business director in the world of advertising and marketing. And then thereafter, because I felt that my career was just there and I couldn't really do much further than that, I was 31 or 32 at that stage. Then I decided to become an entrepreneur. And a lot of you all here have started your entrepreneurial journeys a lot younger than myself. So here's a big a salute to all who are starting in their teens and 20s. And even 30s and 40s is a good time to start anyway. So I started my journey as an entrepreneur quite late, at about 31, 32. And I also now, in Indonesia, I've built, apart from everything that I do, I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs around the world, and I advise a lot of startups around the world. So one of the things that I've done is I've built, it's called the Wempi Dr. It's just named under myself, the Wempi Dr. Kodo Business School in Jakarta. And it's actually become a really successful place where a lot of kids come, a lot of kids and adults, and come to build their startups. And they're all pursuing investments and growing from zero to building, hopefully, what will become multi-million-dollar companies. Now, I also serve as a mentor and advisor to a range of incubators around the world. I work very closely with the British royal family. So I work with Prince Andrew at his program called Pitch at Palace, which we travel around the UK. And also around the world now too, and I think Dubai and a number of other countries too. I'll be visiting this year as part of the program, where entrepreneurs and startups pitch their businesses, and the 12 winners or the 12 finalists come to the palace to pitch, often in front of the Queen and other royal figures. And also this is myself with Peter Jones, who many of you know from Dragon's Den. But the reason why I'm just flashing these images is not to, really, name drop or show that sort of stuff, but it's really to show you all the potential of networking. And this is coming from a guy who was born in a little village in Indonesia, to be able to, on a very regular basis, get invited to be at the palace with royalty, to work very, very closely with them. Not even to work closely with them, but to mentor their CEOs and their entrepreneurs that are rising in the UK and around the world. So the first point that I'd like to make about networking is that networking is not a dirty word at all. Many people regard the word networking as something that's like, it's quite filthy, it's quite dirty, it's like, it means that you've got an agenda, it's quite an evil thing. But actually, it's actually the opposite way around. Networking is not a dirty word. Networking is a beautiful word, and it is actually the only bridge, it's one of the most vital bridges for you to advance from your dreams to your dream itself. So when it comes to networking, is that when people use that word networking, know that it, there are different frames to look at it, right? And networking is always about agendas, right? And the first thing that you need to know about networking is that, do you have an agenda? What is your agenda? And we kind of like to think that we always do have an agenda, like I want to grow my business, I want to do this, I want to do that. But to what level do you have an agenda? What is the micro detail of your agenda? Do you want to grow acquisition of your customers? Do you want to grow loyalty of your customers? Do you want to gain retention of your customers? Do you want to build new partners? So every single venue that you go to, every single networking event, you have to have a specific agenda. Because if you don't have a specific agenda, then you're like shooting, as we say, just shooting moving targets or shooting, shooting targets that you're just going to completely miss. So have a specific agenda, because if you're going to a conference and there's like thousands of stalls and thousands of people there, right, you don't want to be moving from one to the next, to the next, to the next. If you know what your mission is, right, then you know exactly who to approach and where they're going to be located and based, and then start moving your agenda along. The next thing also is that you are a brand. We are all brands. And what do you want to be remembered for? And I think this is very vital. And what I've recently learned, I think it's a very sharp lesson for me in terms of Indonesia. And I'm actually very disappointed in our country right now, because the elections have just recently come up. And it's been a very dirty election with a lot of fake news, a lot of hoaxes, and a lot of horrible things being said and done across Indonesia. And I'm very disappointed in the country. And one thing that you all should know is that as you start to network up and develop a particular public profile, is that people will love you and people will hate you. It's just, unfortunately, this is not the way of our religion, but it is the way of the world right now. Now, here's the thing, is that there is no such thing as a person who is completely bad, and there is no such thing as a person who is completely good. It depends on which facets, that they are, which facets you're looking at them from, right? And so what you've got to really think about is that what do you want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered as somebody who's inspiring, somebody who's intelligent, somebody who's a helper, somebody who is a catalyst? What do you want to be remembered for? And stick with that one single word, right? And reflect that word everywhere you go. So no matter if there is fake news happening about you, no matter if there is slander, all this gossip and all these different things that are being said about you, right? You know who you are, and ultimately, your mission and your accomplishments will shine through. Because no matter what anybody else says about you out there in the world, if you are true to your mission, if you're doing what you need to achieve in this world, you will completely outshine those irrelevant and insignificant people. Because this is a lesson that I've learned also from myself and also from the elections that have come through in Indonesia. So please remember that. The next thing also is that you need to have a unique selling proposition, right? And how do you develop a unique selling proposition? Is that you need to know exactly who you are and what value you can bring to the world. Everybody has a value, and you need to know what your value is. So let's just talk about cars, right? If you don't know what type of car you are, right? If I said the word car, right? One person's going to say Mercedes, the next person's going to say BMW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, what else is there? Porsche, right? If I just said cars, right? But then if I said sports car, right? One person's going to say Audi, Subaru, Porsche, Lamborghini, right? Sports car, what else is there? Even, what else is there? Ferrari, Tesla, right? You could say all of these different sports cars, right? But if I said red sports car, what would you say? Exactly, because Ferrari knows its proposition. And so every time you think of red sports car, everybody said Ferrari, nobody said Audi here, right? Correct. So make sure you all know what is your unique selling proposition. It's what I tell my students all the time. Right, next slide. Network before you need it. We always only network once we urgently need to sell, right? When we haven't met monthly targets or when we're desperate for money in the bank account, right? That's when we urgently network. Well, that's the wrong time to network. You should actually network before you need it. So a question that I like to ask myself, or that you should be asking yourself all the time is that if your business was going bankrupt today, who could you trust to talk to and gain advice and help from? If your business was going bankrupt today, who are the 10 people that you can turn to? Or if you were fired today from your boss, who are the 10 people that you know that you can reliably trust for professional help and support during this time? So you should always try to network before it's necessary. It's like this with all of my students also. They ask me, when's the best time to be searching for investment, Uda? You know, they would ask me. And I would say, well, the best time to search for investment is before you actually need the money. Because there are some people who, you know, like, for example, they're going for, as you learned from Mountain Partners, which was a really great, all of the presentations have been wonderful today, that, you know, like, you know, the investment presentation, there's like, you've got your angel, then you've got your Series A and Series B, etc., right? The best time to start to look for funds is always before, right? You should be hustling every day, hustling every day. So network before you need to network. You should allocate 80% of your time listening to them and 20% of your time talking. And that's a problem that a lot of us do have, is that we are big talkers. But actually, like, apart from when I'm on stage, when I do have to talk, in my family, if you were to speak to my mother, my father, my brother, and my sister, my siblings, and if you were to ask them, who is the quietest in the family? I'm actually the quietest in the family. I rarely talk in the family. I'm always listening because they have wonderful perspectives of everything. So I'm a sponge and I'm listening. And when I'm with my friends, I'm always the one who's doing a lot of the listening. And that's not because I want to do that, right? But because I'm just naturally wired like that. I love to listen and learn from people because I really believe that I can learn a lot more by listening rather than talking. So I'd like you all to take that on board, is that listening is the most vital communication tool. And apart from that, is that listening is one of the most endearing things you can do for others, right? People who are good listeners, right, are the ones who are very well loved. If you want to be liked, listen more, yeah? I'm being told that I've got 5 minutes, right? The next one is, sorry. Oops. Oops, here we go. Okay, listen to understand, not to answer. Okay, often we listen so we can just urgently answer and urgently rebut, but no, you shouldn't do that. You should be listening to understand, not to answer. Also, be generous but genuine in your compliments and your comments to others, right? Anybody, like, I can smell a fake person, right? We can all smell fake people, right? We can all smell those people who are going to talk nice about you in front of you, and then they're going to talk really horrible about you behind your back. They're the ones that you should immediately cut off from your life. Don't become that person, right? Be an asker of questions, not a know-it-all. Ask a lot of questions, right? People love it when you ask them questions, right? Ask people questions, not somebody who knows everything, right? And do not hijack conversations. If you're in a group with a lot of different people, or even with just one person, do not hijack the conversation. And this all kind of goes back to listening also. Right, also carry the confidence of your heroes and the heart of your heroes, right? Right, we all love those heroes who are really confident, who can go into any room and just like charm everybody. Be that person, right? But also have the heart of a hero also, who's always there wanting to help everybody else. Also, a really horrible thing is to dismiss somebody as being unimportant. Do not dismiss anybody as being unimportant. Sometimes you meet a person who's a bit younger than you or a bit inexperienced or whatever, and you think they're unimportant, but actually they might be connected into somebody who's really amazingly awesome, that you're, really busting to meet and know, right? So do not dismiss anybody as unimportant. It's the most horrible thing you can do as a human being. Be a connector of dots, right? We see dots in this world. See how this person connects to that person, this project connects to that project, and this initiative connects to that, your mission connects to that. Be a connector, make those dots connect. Only you can make those dots connect. Right? Follow up and deliver on your promises. If you've promised to introduce one person to the next person, A to B, Z to C, or to give them information about insights about this or that, right? Make sure you deliver on your promises after you've networked. Deliver on your promises. It's like to the GIEEC when they contacted me. I promised that I would come and speak, and I said I'd bring a delegation from Indonesia. And, you deliver on those things, right, to support the community. Right. Also, the next thing also is do not keep score when you're networking with people, right? And this is a problem that a lot of the Islamic community has, right? You want a percentage for everything in life. Well, life doesn't work like that, right? Don't always connect this person to that person hoping that you'll get a percentage of the cuts or whatever. It doesn't work like that. If you want to help people, ikhlas, right? Help them, right? With ikhlas. Unless you make a strict business deal that, okay, with this or that, then you're going to get whatever out of that, right? But other than that, be ikhlas to help somebody. Because although somebody is asking, a person is asking you for constant help all the time, right? You might actually be asking somebody else for constant help all the time. It's just the way the world works, right? But be ikhlas in your chain of support. Also, for networking to work, you've got to also believe in the power and potential and magic of networking, right? You've got to, like one of the points earlier on is that you've got to invest in yourself, right? Invest in yourself, and networking is an important aspect of investing in yourself. And also, when you're meeting with people at a networking event, do not spend any more than 5 minutes with people, right? 5 minutes is a good time to get to know a company, get to know a person, and then move on. We all know that this is a networking event and a place to meet people, yeah? Have an ask. I think it's vital to have an ask. After you have a transaction, a meeting with somebody, have an ask. And what that means is that, what do you want? What is that? After you've listened to that person and potentially know who their connections are or what they do, have an ask from them. Ask them, can you help me in this particular way? Can you help me in this particular way? Because that means they will, there's a solid, the other person has an understanding that you have a solid need for them. And we all like being needed. Right? And also, when you're networking too, is that be an interesting storyteller. One of the greatest skills of an entrepreneur is the art of storytelling. And maybe another time, another year, or at this event that I can teach you the art of storytelling as an entrepreneur, because it's vital, because the Islamic story needs to get out there, right? But as entrepreneurs, you need to have that storytelling skill. Right, and also, if nobody can sell yourself, an investor will never invest in you, or nobody will invest in you. Right? So every networking session that you have, you've got to be able to sell yourself too, right? Because if you can't sell yourself, nobody will invest in you. I've just got a couple more slides. Now, here's an important point, is network where your customers are, not where your industry is. I think it's horrible when people, for example, in the advertising industry, they network at these advertising events. And then people in the fashion industry, they network in the fashion industry events, right? And then people in the electronics or whatever, they network in the electronics. Well, how's an electronic event, a person selling electronics, going to benefit from networking with, electronics and advertising people. Are you going to sell your advertising services to another advertising company? It's not going to work like that, right? So an advertising person, you got to network. You got to go to that car industry event. You got to go to that fashion industry event. You got to go to that teaching industry event. So make sure you're networking at industries and events that are different to yours, right? Also build a quarterly networking agenda of must-go-to events. Every 3 months, start to list down what are the events that you must attend to advance your business and advance your goals. It should be quarterly. It doesn't need to be annually. It just needs to be quarterly. Invest and commit to that. Arrive early, leave late, because sometimes the best connections are the ones that you make before it gets really busy and after it gets really quiet. And also connect digitally immediately, because this is the era of LinkedIn, etc. So please connect immediately. And my last point is just, like, we can learn from everybody. We can absolutely learn from everybody in this world. I learn from my friends who are of all different religions. I learn from my friends who are of all different, ethnicities and backgrounds, etc. But I was recently interviewed by the editor-in-chief at Forbes. And, we were discussing, and I asked, he was interviewing me, but I ended up asking him a lot of questions also. And I asked him, you've certainly interviewed a lot of really famous and wealthy and amazing people in this world. And I said to him, who would you say was an interesting person that you met? And his answer was David Rockefeller. And I said to him, why? What did you find interesting about him? And he said, one of the things that Rockefeller used to do, right, was that he would have a Rolodex, right? He would have a huge room. He would have a huge room full of people's business cards, all filed away, amazing, like in spirals as well as, different columns, etc., right? And obviously we know Rockefeller controls the world's financial services in many ways. But he used to file all of these business cards all away. And when he met somebody, he would write exactly how he met them. And one interesting thing that was said in that conversation, for example, if David Rockefeller was here today and he met yourself, sir, and he said, sorry, what's your name? Nasiba? Ahmed? Okay. He would then write down, if you pass me your business card, he would write down exactly where he met you, the GIEEC 2017 at Kuala Lumpur, right? And one interesting fact that he found out about you. He said, my interesting fact is that you love cats, right? Or you said to him that your mother lives at, Bangalore, or your father was, an immigrant to New Jersey, whatever. He would write one interesting fact. And then the next time he would meet you or connect with you digitally or in whichever way, he would know exactly, and he would use that as the prompter. And that opens the gates to conversations and the gates to a long-term relationship and partnership. So I hope you learned a lot today, and thank you very much for your time. Cheers. There you go.